Today is the day that we go over all of the books that I read in 2019, featuring Dusty, the new kitty I got in 2019. Hey guys, it's Hannah, and today I am doing my 2019 reading review, reading year, yearly wrap-up, year review, whatever I end up titling this. I want to start this off by saying that I was watching last year's review video to see what my goals were, and in it I mentioned that I rang in the new year with 700 subscribers, and this time I'm ringing in the new year with 2.68k, so thank you so much for that. It's been quite a year on all fronts, and thank you for joining me. If you're old, thank you so much for sticking around. If you're new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks. Now on to what you care about, the statistics of my reading year. I love the GOODREADS year in books, and we're going to start off by looking at that, and then we're going to kind of do a month-by-month breakdown, and then we'll talk about goals, and maybe I'll add something else in there that I'll think about doing later. I also, once again, have my handy-dandy computer, but with different stickers this time. If y'all ever want a sticker tour, I got a lot of stickers, let me know. I can do that. I don't know if that's something that people want to watch, but I'm open to making one. So in 2019, I read 18,672 pages across 80 books. My shortest book by page number was The Stone Collector by A. Kendra Green, which comes in at a whopping 27 pages. My longest book was Bitter Blue by Kristen Kishore, which comes in at a measly 576 pages, which I will say, considering that's my longest book, it feels very short for a longest book. The average length of books that I read is 233 pages. My most popular book, in terms of other people have also marked it as read on GOODREADS, is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, and that comes in with 1,148,818 people who have also marked it as read. And my least popular book is Georgia O'Keeffe Portraits of Women Artists for Children by Robin Montana Turner, and 9 other people have marked it as read. I had a really good year rating-wise. My average rating for 2019 was 4.2 stars. And my highest rated on GOODREADS, in terms of everyone else also agrees with me that it was a really good book, was The Stone Collector by A. Kendra Green, which has a 4.83 average star rating, which is incredible for a book. My first review of the year was for The Queen of by Megan Wallen Turner. My review reads, wow. Just wow. As complex and well thought out as her world is, it cannot compare to her characters. This is now my favorite, and I don't know if I'll be able to handle it if each book just keeps getting better this way. Spoiler alert, they kept getting better because the next one was my favorite. I never wanted to put it down. It's so engaging and everything sucks you in. I am in shock, I am in love, I am in desperate need of the next one. And my final review was for We Are in a Book. And I said, I've been wanting to read this since I saw pictures of it online, and it was just as adorable and amazing as I expected it to be. Both of these books I gave 5 stars to. And I just recently watched Ariel Basset's year review, and she did a What's the Prettiest Cover of 2019, and I wasn't going to do that, but I think I'm going to do that now. And so looking at all of the books, you can see them. There's a lot of beautiful covers here. I think that my favorite one is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald. I love the colors in it, I love the art style, I love the lettering and how it's spaced around the hawk. It's just, I think it's my favorite cover from this year. So that was my year in review, and now I want to kind of break down my books from month to month. So in January, I read 7 books. I read The Queen of Atolia, O'Keeffe and Texas, The King of Atolia, Miss Bunkle's Book, Water Runs Red, Kilkenny, and Ride the River. And of these books, my favorite from that month was The King of Atolia. That book was so good. And there were a lot of good books this month, but that one just took the cake. It is now in my top 3 books of all time. When people ask me, what's your favorite book? I never give just one because I don't know how to. I always say 3, and it is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, Weekends with O'Keeffe by C.S. Merrill, and The King of Atolia by Megan Wallen Turner. It was just such a good book, and it's still my favorite in the series. In February, I read 4 books. I read The Cherokee Trail, Famous in a Small Town, The Rider of Lost Creek, and The Mountain Valley War. Of those books, I think my favorite was The Mountain Valley War. It was a reread, so I almost didn't choose it as a favorite because it was a reread, but of those books, it was my favorite. And honestly, I could have done either The Mountain Valley War or The Rider of Lost Creek because they're very similar books, both in the Lewis L'Amour Kilkenny series, but I think I like Mountain Valley War a little bit better. In March, I read 5 books. I read Fish Tales, Monument Rock, Shades of Grey, Instant Winner, and H is for Hawk. And this was a tricky month to choose a favorite from because the ones that I loved for very different reasons. But I think I'm gonna have to say that my favorite from March is Fishtails, which might come as a shock, but I just love how that book has stuck with me. I love how that book made me think about my day-to-day life and how I interact with others, and it was just a really good book. In April, I read 6 books. I read Blueberry Muffin Murder, The Boxcar Children, Counterfeit Conspiracies, Coffee, Tea, or Murder, Killer Run, and The Body in the Library. If you're like, Hannah, those are all mystery books. They are. In April, I made a kind of challenge for myself, and I actually vlogged it. It'll be linked, where I read just a month of mystery books because it was something I read a lot as a kid, but I hadn't really read many in a while, and I wanted to get back into that genre. And so I mostly read just cozy mysteries. And so this one, it was very difficult to choose a favorite because The Boxcar Children is what I credit as the book that got me really into reading. But I also read a fantastic Agatha Christie book and other great cozy mysteries. So I think the one that I'm going to choose as my favorite is Killer Run by Lynn Cahoon, because I have been continuing on with that series. I haven't continued on with any of the others, but that one got me started on that series. I've loved it so far. So since that brought new books into my life, I'm gonna say that that was my favorite. In May, I read 13 books. I read Serious Moonlight, Third Girl, Death Comes to Pemberley, Guidebook to Murder, Dear Mr. Knightley, Mission to Murder, If the Shoe Kills, Herding Cats, Good Night Already, Mother Bruce, Happily Ever After, and Midnight Rider. And of these books, my favorite would have to be Dear Mr. Knightley. It was a very touching read, very well written. It's kind of a retelling of Daddy Longlegs, which is a fantastic classic, and I really love the spin it took, and so that one has to be my favorite from this month. Although I will say, Mother Bruce, a fantastic picture book. You have to pick it up if there's a kid in your life, or even if just you want to read it because it's so great. In June, I read 12 books. I read Band Together, Out of Time, Sink or Swim, The Library Book, In an Absent Dream, A Bird's Eye View, Georgia O'Keeffe, Portraits of Women Artists for Children, Georgia O'Keeffe, We Are in a Book, Rules for Visiting, Stone Cold, and Lumberjane's bonus tracks. Now this month had 2 really, really good books that I love, and that was The Library Book and Rules for Visiting. I love them both for different reasons. One's literary fiction, one's a non-fiction. The Library Book follows the Los Angeles Public Library. Rules for Visiting is kind of a look into friendships. And I'm gonna have to say that my favorite from June is probably Rules for Visiting because it was just such a good novel. It's touching. I still think about it. Not that I don't still think about The Library Book, but just something about Rules for Visiting, like that's gonna be a favorite for a lifetime. In July, I read 8 books. I read When You Are Near, Make Your Bed, Ender's Game, I Could Pee on This, Graceling, Stealing Home, Fire, and Georgia O'Keeffe and New Mexico, A Sense of Place. My favorite from this month. Looking at it, it should be difficult because all of these were great books. And we all know I love Georgia O'Keeffe, so you'd think if I read a Georgia O'Keeffe book, that would be my favorite. But no, my favorite is Stealing Home by Becky Wallace because this is now my new favorite young adult contemporary. It is so cute, it is adorable, it is set in Texas. It was just great. In August, that was a weird noise. In August, I read 6 books. We're slowly moving down in the amount of books I'm reading. I read A Conspiracy of Kings, My Father's Dragon, The Keeper of Lost Things, Wherever You Go, Bitter Blue, and Vow of Thieves. Now this one was tricky to choose a favorite because they're each a very different book, and I loved all of them for very different reasons. But I think my favorite is going to be The Keeper of Lost Things because it was such an interesting premise, and I love the way the author approached it, and the characters were just very fun, and I enjoyed following them along on their journey. Although it is neck and neck with My Father's Dragon because that thing was just adorable and fun, but I think I'm gonna have to go with The Keeper of Lost Things. In September, I read 4 books. I read Girl Waits with Gun, You Don't Look Your Age, and Other Fairy Tales, Rubber Legs and Whitetail Hairs, and The Stone Collector. This month is so tricky to choose a favorite, but I think I'm gonna have to go with The Stone Collector. It was just such a simple book, and I wished it had been longer. Like I mentioned earlier, it was like 27 pages, and even though I wished it had been longer, the book covered everything you needed to know. It did what it had to do in 27 pages, and that's just impressive, and the writing style was beautiful, and it was just a great little book to read, and I'm so glad I bought it. I bought it in Dallas when I went to see the Lightning Thief musical, and I'm really glad I did because that was a beautiful book. In October, I only read 3 books. I read The #1 Ladies Detective Agency, When the Men Were Gone, and Crazy Rich Asians, and of these 3, my favorite was The #1 Ladies Detective Agency. It's set in Africa. It's just such a comfort read. It's just a feel-good book and you enjoy the entire time of reading, but it's also very engaging, and I just absolutely loved it. I'm continuing on with the series kind of slowly, but I'm loving everything that I've been reading so far. Fantastic book. In November, I read 2 books. I read Secret and Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, and of those two, my favorite was Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore. It was a really cool book, and it kind of explores the intersection between technology and physical books and reading and how they influence each other. And there's kind of this whole mystery going on, and I went in completely blind and absolutely loved it. So I recommend going in completely blind if you can, because I think that's just the way to go. It was such an enjoyable read. Loved it. Although I will say it didn't have tough competition because Secret wasn't my favorite. In December, where we're rising to the top again, I read 10 books. Didn't think I was going to, but we managed it. Although I will say there are a bunch of short stories in here. But those books I read are The Sackett Brand, Hanging Woman Creek, A Very Mummy Holiday, Santa Puppy, A Deadly Brew, Tears of the Giraffe, Grandma Gatewood's Walk, West of Dodge, A Gun for Kilkenny, and Dressed to Kill. And my favorite from these is Grandma Gatewood's Walk. Last year one of my favorites was A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, about a guy who walks the Appalachian Trail. This is about the woman who saved the Appalachian Trail. Emma Gatewood, her story is just inspiring, and I loved how this book was structured. I loved getting to read about her. Fantastic. And I read it in a day. I was stuck on a plane for a very long time, and that's kind of why I read it in a day, but I read it in a day. Now I'm going to choose, I just decided to do this, a top 5 for the year. In no particular order, although this one is number 1. And I may be editing this and be like, no, you should have said this instead of this. So we're just gonna go off the top of my head and see what comes out of my mouth, and we're gonna say that those are my top 5 for 2019. The first one, and this like actually is the first one in my all-time favorite from the year, The King of Atolia by Megan Walner-Turner. Also in my top 5 is Rules for Visiting by Jessica Francis Kane, as well as the #1 Ladies Detective Agency by Alexander McCall Smith. We're on 3. Stealing Home by Becky Wallace, and I'm gonna have to say The Library Book by Susan Orlean. So those are my top 5 books for 2019. Are they set in stone? No, they're barely scratched in pencil. Actually, for the most part, that's a pretty solid list. Like, I would say that those are probably gonna stay my top 5. Now we are on to goals, which are always the scariest part of these videos, because the question is, have you met them? The first goal I made in 2019 was to read 50 books. This is a goal I make every single year. I want to read a minimum of 50 books per year, and I read 80, so that's a check. The second goal I made was to write a Goodreads review for every book that I read. I stopped at We Are in a Book. That was my last review for the year, and I read We Are in a Book in June. So I didn't complete this goal. And I could have, like, I kept thinking at the very end of December when I was doing that whole internship, I was so busy. I didn't have time to do it, but I kept thinking, you know what, I should sit down and write all these reviews. Then I didn't want to. So didn't make that. Valiant effort though. I did make it halfway. That's pretty good. And my third goal, which was a very last minute goal that I randomly blurted out, was to read 12 books that I already own. So I haven't checked to see if this happened. So we're gonna look. And I didn't make any rules about whether I could buy a book and then immediately read it. That's like a gray area right now. And I'm also trying to remember what books I own. I don't think I have a physical of Queen Atolia yet, but I own King of Atolia. I own Miss Bunkle's book. I own Waters Run Red, but I bought it to read it, but then I read it. So I feel like we're gonna be lenient this time and say it doesn't have to be one I've owned for a while. We're just gonna say that I own it and I read it. I own Kilkenny, I own Ride the River, I own Cherokee Trail. I think Famous in a Small Town is my sister, so I don't own that. I'm gonna need a piece of paper. Okay, starting again. We're gonna tally mark. King of Atolia, Miss Bunkle's book, Water Runs Red, Kilkenny, Ride the River, Cherokee Trail, Rider of Lost Creek, Mountain Valley War, Fishtails, because again I bought it to read it. It was for a class, if you missed that wrap up, which that's a book I read for a class and it was my favorite from the month. That's pretty impressive. Instant winner, Monument Rock is not mine, it's my family's. H is for Hot, Blueberry Muffin Murder, Boxcar Children, Counterfeit Conspiracies I bought to read. Serious Moonlight, again I think that's my sister's and I read her copy. Body in the Library, Third Girl, Death Comes to Pemberley, Dear Mr. Knightley, Herding Cats, Midnight Rider, Rules for Visiting, which I checked it out from my library and then I was loving it so much that I wanted to annotate it a bit, and so I bought a copy. So I finished it with my copy, but I started it with a library book. That's how much I loved that book. Stealing Home, I now own it, but I just bought it, so I didn't read like my copy, so that's not gonna count. My Father's Dragon, that was my mom's copy. Conspiracy of Kings, Vow of Thieves, Girl Waits with Gun, that one. That one's mine. Yeah, no, I was given that. #1 latest detective agency. Stone Collector. When the Men Were Gone. I got that last year at the book festival. Secret. Mr. Penumbra's. Sackett Brand. Hanging Woman Creek. Here's the giraffe I borrowed from my aunt. Grandma Gatewood's Walk. West of Dodge. I just bought that to read it. A Gun for Kilkenny. I just bought that to read it. And we're at the end. Okay. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 34 books that I read this year were from my shelves. They were bought at various points in the year, so how accurate this is, but it's fine. That's pretty good. 34 books, that's almost half of the books I read this year that were my books. That's a pretty good track record. That's a really good track record. And now we're at the last leg of this video, the point where I make my goals for 2020. Goal #1, this is gonna be a shocker. I want to read 50 books. Second goal is that I want to read 12 books that I already own that I don't purchase at some point during 2020. So it can be books I got for Christmas this year. It can be books on here that I haven't read yet. So books that I already own by the end of 2019, I want to read at least 12. That's my new goal. We're going to be a little more specific in this following year. And the thing with that is I'm going to forget that I've made this goal because that's what happened last year. So I just got really lucky that I read a lot of books that I already own. But I'm going to have to be a little more conscious of it this year because I've added that extra rule to it. So I feel like I should have one more goal though. You know what? I'm gonna shoot myself in the leg. You know what my last goal is? Where'd my book go? Hang on. I've doomed myself. My final goal is to finish reading Hamilton by Ron Chernow. That's where I am, okay? That's how much I have left. This has been on my currently reading GOODREADS since like 2015, I think, because I was reading this for a paper I was writing and I finished writing the paper, but I didn't finish reading the book. But I intended to finish reading the book, but it hasn't happened. I'm regretting this goal already, but we'll stick it in and I'll be fine. And that's it. Comment down below and let me know how your 2019 reading year went. Comment a few of your stats. Comment what your favorite book of the year was. Also comment down below and let me know any of your goals that you have for 2020. Are you just reaching for the stars or are you being stupid like I am? Let me know. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I will see y'all again in another one soon.